Hi again, intermediate algebra students. Time for another lesson in Chapter 6, this on something called slope-intercept form. Now, intercept in math, of course, a little bit different than the interception that you see in football, but kind of the same idea, where a guy who intercepts a ball in football breaks in front of a receiver or crosses over a receiver. You can kind of think of intercepts the same way in mathematics anyway. For instance, if we talk about this particular line that I'm going to draw here, I'm going to put a dot there, and here, I'm going to draw a line going through here, and we have a couple different intercepts here. In this case, we have something called the y-intercept, which you guys are familiar with, and that, of course, is where the graph crosses the y-axis, and in this case, we would say that it is 4. And we also have something, though, that you might be a little bit less familiar with, and that's called the x-intercept. And in this case, it would be -7. Now, we can graph lines using these intercept methods. You might remember we did that a little bit in Chapter 5. So that's the notion of intercept, part of this important formula called the slope-intercept form. Can we find the x and y intercepts of a line like this? Well, this is pretty similar to what you may remember doing back in Chapter 5. What I like to do is make a little chart here, an XY chart, and sometimes this works out easier than others. Notice this is an equation that's in standard form. So basically I put 0 in for x and see what y is, and then I do the opposite. I put 0 in for y and see what x is. So in this case, if I put 0 in for x, so basically that's gone. Sometimes I cover that up when I do it on the board, or you can put your hand or thumb over it. So then really what I have is -2 times y equals 12. And of course that would have to be a negative number, and it's going to be -6. So 0, -6 is 1 point. That's actually the y-intercept. And then in opposite fashion, then I'll put 0 in for y. Right in here. So again, anytime you multiply something by 0, that whole term cancels out, and then I have left 12, because then 12 equals 12. So 12, 0, this is going to go off my chart a little bit. Right about here I think would be where 12, 0 is, and there I could draw that line. I only need 2 points, remember, to draw a line, and that's how you can graph using the intercept method. Again, that should not be entirely. Alright, now here's what the kind of the meat and potatoes of this particular lesson, the slope-intercept form. You've seen this before. Y equals mx plus b. Hugely important, where m is the slope and b is the y-intercept. Y and x, those are parts of the equation that need to be in there. So if we take a look at this first example, write the slope-intercept equation of the line with slope 3 and y-intercept 1. Well, here's my general form, y equals mx plus b. In this case, it's a pretty easy one. They tell me the slope is 3, that goes in place of m. The y-intercept is 1, that goes in place of b. So here's all I have to do. And we'll have questions like this on a quiz and test, so you should be able to do pretty well on that, I would think. Alright, trickier now. Can we find the slope and y-intercept for these following equations? Well, the first one here, once again, this is in that slope-intercept form. Whenever we solve an equation for y, typically that will be in that slope-intercept form. So in this case, fairly easy to see that the number that's multiplied by x, that's going to be my slope. So in this case, that's -2/3. We represent that with the letter m. And the number that's sitting out by itself, then that's the y-intercept. Again, really important to be able to get these in place in this y equals form, because then it's pretty easy to graph these rascals. Alright, now let's take a look at this next one, which is a little trickier. Basically, can I solve this for y? Well, I'm going to try to get y by itself as I typically would, so I'm going to subtract 3x from each side like that. That's going to leave me with -4y equals -3x minus 8, And notice I rearranged that order just so it's more like in that slope-intercept form. You don't necessarily have to do that. My last step then to get y by itself would be to divide by -4. And I like to show that underneath every single term like this, just to show what my equation will end up to be. So I get y on the left side, which is what I want. Now notice on this right side I have -3 divided by -4. So a negative divided by a negative will make it +3/4 x. And the same thing over here, -8 divided by -4 is actually +2. So there's my equation. And then of course I can easily pick out, in this case, my slope is going to be 3/4 and my y-intercept will be 2. So that's why we spent time earlier this year trying to solve for particular variables, because that will help us out in a situation. Alright, now here's another tough one. Standard form equation of the line through those 2 points. This is one of the tougher type of problems we'll have in this whole unit. So let's see if we can figure out what to do here. In this case now, remember we can never start with standard form. You can never start with standard form. We always have to start with one of my other forms. But what I do need to always know is what is the slope. Slope is change in y over change in x. Okay, so let's see if we could quickly do that here. My change in my y values, well, my y values are 6 and 3, so my change in that is 3. And my x values from -1 to -2 is just 1. So my slope is going to be 3. Now the question is, should it be +3 or -3? Sometimes I like to just sketch these 2 points. -2, 3 is going to be about like that, and -1, 6 is like this. So line slopes upward like that, so it's going to be +3 for the slope. You could use a little bit different definition if you wanted, but this usually works out pretty good. Now I think what I'm going to use is this. Remember this from a couple lessons ago. This is called point slope. So I think I'm going to use this again. This is a good place to start when we're trying to do equations like this. And the nice thing here, I can pick either of these 2 points to put in for my particular points. It doesn't really matter. So in this case, I'll just choose the first point. So it'll be y minus 3. My m that I just figured out is also 3. And then x minus a -2, which is x plus 2, like that. Then I'll try to quickly finish this out. I do have to do a little distributive property. So 3x plus 6. I'm going to add 3 to each side. Remember this standard form. We have to get the x's and y's on the same side. So we get y equals 3x plus 9. That's actually the slope-intercept form. But then I'll have to subtract 3x from each side. So I get -3x plus y equals 9. That's not quite in standard form, remember, because of this negative sign in front of it. If you got that far on a test, though, I'd be really happy with you. But the super-duper actual answer must be 3x minus y equals -9. So, tough problem right there, boys and girls, because you have to find the slope first, go to an intermediate equation like the point slope form, and then mess around with that till you get it in standard form. So that's kind of a challenging one, to be sure. And I think that's about it for today. We'll keep working on this in class, but good job. Thanks for hanging in there, and we'll see you guys in class.